Alright, by now I've done approximately 2 or 3 tutorials on how to generate EQ profiles using REW EQ Wizard for any IEM or headphone that doesn't have an existing EQ profile made either by Auto EQ, or if you want a greater level of accuracy that you cannot achieve with Auto EQ without downloading it, installing it, and learning the ins and outs of all the parameters. So today I will be, as I have been asked, to do a recorded tutorial of how to use REW EQ Wizard to generate and make your own EQ profiles from scratch, which is my preferred method. The first two things that you are going to need, depending upon your level of access and what you have access to, are going to be V2X and REW EQ Wizard. You are going to need V2X. It's my preference for tracing SPLs to get graphs if you do not have the text data for the measurement data for those IEMs or headphones. I personally am comfortable doing this because I have access to Critical's data. But I would recommend that if you wanted to do this, that you get the data directly from him and you pay to have access to it rather than scraping it, because I think it's a little bit of gray area on whether or not that's acceptable. I have been asked today to do an EQ profile for the KZ-ZST. So that is the one I'm going to be demonstrating on. I have never done this one before, though I've EQ'd hundreds of IEMs and made different targets and profiles for a variety of IEMs, including emulations to other IEMs. I've never done this one before, and just like in the classroom, I like going into things fresh. It helps me because it will allow me to think aloud and give you an idea of how I approach these kinds of things. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, so I do not have to do this in REW EQ Wizard, I'm going to sum the left and right and make it to where it's not two separate channels. It's a pretty basic thing to do that helps you later on. I used to sum them in REW EQ Wizard when I'm using raw data because it doesn't come averaged. But this is something that you can do if you are going to be scraping the data using an SPL tracer. So I'm just going to take a screenshot of this and I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to open it in REW EQ Wizard, rather V2X, and I'm going to scrape the data for it. And I'm going to show you exactly how you are going to scrape the data and how you set up your parameters so you do everything correctly for that. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go under the Tools tab on V2X, and you're going to go to SPL Trace, and you are going to find the location that you put the image file. So now I have it pulled up right here using V2X, and the first thing you have to do to make sure that you have accurate data is that you make sure your axes are appropriately aligned and the appropriate values are input into the SPL tracer. So there are really only 4 bars I need to deal with: my far left, my far right, my upper left, and my bottom left. The other 2 are for impedance, and since we're not doing that, that's not one of our concerns right now. That's not something that we are going to bother with. So I'm going to make sure that my gain, my dBSPL, matches what I have outlined on the graph. So I'm going to set my bottom to 30 and my upper to 85. And I'm going to make sure that my frequency response spectrum matches. And it already matches, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue with that. The SPL trace function traces in red, so it's unfortunate that this came out in red, but you can go under Edit and Invert Colors, and it will make it much easier to see your SPL trace function when you are doing it. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to make sure once again that I have it aligned because it looks a little bit weird to me. And then I'm going to go to Trace SPL. And you're going to start at the base and just work your way up. And you're going to notice that it pretty quickly finds the general trajectory of things, and then if you need to make any manual adjustments, you can do so by hand, like so. It doesn't really like spikies or anything like that, but I'm going to start over and just show that typically all that it takes to get an accurate enough is 2 clicks, setting the base and then picking another point on the graph. And then there's going to be some roughness in the base, but that's not anything that's going to be of a great concern. And we're within pretty good variance in the treble, so that's also not an area of great concern. So I'm just going to export this, and I'm going to label it KZZST, and this is going to give me my frequency response data, the numbers that I need to load into Room EQ Wizard. So I've exported this, and now I'm ready to bring this into Room EQ Wizard. But there are going to be a few things that I need to do to set up Room EQ Wizard to do this correctly or with any level of accuracy if I'm going to a specific target. So in order to load a profile into Room EQ Wizard, once you open up, all you have to do is go to File, Import Frequency Response. So I'm going to go back to my desktop where I saved the ZST FRD, frequency response data, and I'm going to open it, and you will see that, hey, it looks like things were saved pretty accurately, which is a good first step. The next thing I'm going to do is that you have 2 options. Clinical uses an IEC 711 clone rather than a Gross measurement rig for his IEMs. So to ensure that we are as accurate as possible when building to a non-clinical target. So this would not be a concern if I'm trying to EQ one CRIN measurement to another CRIN measurement, but if I'm EQing from one CRIN measurement to a Harman target, then I need to make sure that I compensate to make sure that things match up. Luckily, Yako, the maker of Auto EQ, has already done this for us, and I've already provided some information that works in REW. So you have a couple options. You can either use the file that I generated, which is the process I'm going to do today, or you can download and install the full Auto EQ suite. So today I'm going to be EQing this to Harman 2016. Because actually I'm going to EQ it to Harman 2019. I'm going to EQ it to Harman 2019 because that's, I assume, what SecMet is going to want, but we shall see, and I will revise it later if that's what desired. Actually, no, I changed my mind. We're doing Harman 2016 because the treble on Harman 2019 is less than satisfactory. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to import my compensation file that I use to convert a target from a Gross target, that is the measurement as done by Sean Olive et al., which is, for this place, I'm using a stand-in oratory because he uses a similar rig to the one that Sean Olive et al. Used in their research. So that's what I'm going to be using for this. And then the last thing that I'm going to need is my target curve itself. So there are a few different places that you can get target curve data. You can scrape the data for the 2019, but for most people, the best way to get it is going to be to install Auto EQ and get it that way. I have Auto EQ installed on certain PCs and not on others. So I can tell here that I do not have it installed on the one I'm currently on after my move. So I'm going to see if I have Harman 2016 saved anywhere. And I do, luckily. So if you have Auto EQ, you can go into the files, go into the clinical section, and find a Harman target that's already been compensated for the 711 clone that he uses. But For our purposes today, what we're going to do is just apply my file that I generated of the difference between Critical's measurements and Oratory's measurements that I got through Auto EQ's data and research that Jaco did, and then I'm going to just apply that. And I'm going to show you how to do that. In order to do that, I'm going to go to the All SPL tab, and I'm going to ignore everything that's here. So my compensation file already does a difference between. So I'm going to apply a difference between back on to my target. So I had done A divided by B, which is normally difference is subtraction, is just subtracting one from the other, but this uses logarithmic functions. So A divided by B is really A minus B, and A times B is really A plus B for our purposes. So I'm just going to make sure that once I've gone to my gear icon that I have my correct thing. So I'm going to go ahead and compensate the 2016 target to a more accurate rig, or one that it was derived on. I don't want to say more accurate, one that is derived on by doing A times B and generating. So this is going to be my 2016 compensated file, and I can go ahead and delete my original file here, and I can go ahead and delete my original compensation file as well, because they're no longer needed. The next step is going to be to decide where I'm going to align these two things. So I'm going to click on overlays up here at the top toolbar. I'm going to full screen just to make it easier, and I'm going to go to approximately 1K, and you can see the value at the bottom as well. And I'm going to look at the gains of these two and try to match them at 1K. So I'm going to go to my 2016, and I'm just going to add 60 to it and see where I get. And so I need to subtract approximately numbers. I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher. So I'm just going to do it by eye and then confirm that my numbers are correct, and they are correct. A couple things that I'm going to note is that we can see by looking at this that the information for the KZZST is already smoothened. Notice how there are no little jaggies or anything odd going on with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to smoothen my 2016 comp, my target file. I don't think I want to go to a full 12th, because if you notice, we'll see in this region the difference is getting smaller. It's more than just getting rid of jaggies. So I'm going to just do the 1/24th smoothing and live with a slight amount of jaggedness. Now that I have these aligned, the main overlay that I'm going to be dealing with from this point onward is predicted SPL, because I'm going to be trying to convert this red target into the other target. Thank you. Sorry, my wife was handing me something. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the main REW EQ Wizard screen, the home screen. I'm going to make sure that I have the one that I want to be modifying, that I want to be making an EQ profile for, designing my filters for selected, and I'm going to hit EQ, and I'm going to hit EQ filters, and that's going to give me a set of EQ filters and parameters that I can play with that are always going to remain on top. And what this is going to let me do is I will just do a drastic example. It's going to show me the changes, the simulated changes that are going to occur to the graph that I'm working on. So there are two general workflow possibilities that you can use while doing this. My preference is to start from the base and work my way up, but also ensuring that my pinna gain region is as accurate as possible. So there are a couple of things that I note immediately and that stand out to me the most, and those are the deltas between this region and the deltas between this region. And by delta, I just mean difference for those who are not mathematically savvy or learned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that there is a pretty even curve right here. And I'm going to try to find the middle point of that curve. And typically is where the greatest difference is, but if the curve is uneven, if it's not a perfect curve, then it's not going to work that way. So I'm going to leave it as a peak filter, and I'm going to set it to the value that I see here at the bottom that I highlighted. Now I'm going to make an assumption on what the Q is going to be. I have an idea of what the Q is going to be just because I've been doing this so long and have done it so many times. But we're going to start, and I'm going to do something that's a little bit wrong just to show you how you do this. So I'm going to just reduce until I see kind of what I want, and notice that there is still a large amount here and a large amount here. This is what I meant by I was going to do something wrong, which is I knew this Q was in no way going to be low enough. It was not going to be wide enough. So I'm going to try something like 0.7 instead and see what that gives me. And that gives me much better information. And then I'm just going to shift my center frequency a little bit more and see what I'm working with there. And now, once again, I see that I might need to refine my Q again. And I'm starting to get something that I like. I'm starting to get something that looks pretty accurate to the target. And I will come back. Once I get close enough, then I will come back to it later and work on any fine tunings and making things align as good as possible. So this one has a pretty clear difference, but it's also very sloped here and wider here. So this is going to cause me a couple issues. So I can either fix it with two filters, and I can show you what type of issues it's going to cause. I just know it's going to cause issues, but I can show you what type of issues that it's going to cause by just picking the area of greatest difference, or where it would be if it followed a good round curve. But I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pick 2 for my Q value to show the issue. So you see that the issue is going to be that I also have a little bit of a bump here. So if I fix this and increase my Q to be accurate, then I'm going to have a little bit of a bump, and this is the issue that I knew was going to have all along before I told you guys about it and before I said it out loud. I'm going to have to decide if I have an extra filter to fix this or not later. What do I mean by an extra filter? Is I tend to try to keep things to 10 filters for use for Android. Peace GUI now accepts 13 filters, but it used to only accept 10, so that's another reason that I tried to get within plus or minus 0.2 decibel variance from the target using 10 bands. So I'm going to ignore this little bump for now, and I'm going to ignore this very easily fixed bass region for now, and focus now on a part that stands out to our ears the most, typically, if it's wrong. So we have an issue that this is a large slope, but it also has a big peak at the tip of it. So the main thing is this is also probably going to take 2 filters. This is a KZ IEM. They're known for being peaky. Some IEMs are harder or easier to EQ depending upon what they are, what their natural graph looks like, and what you are EQing them to. The peakier something is, typically the harder it's going to be. So I'm just going to make an educated guess on this. And it looks bigger here, so instead of going directly towards the center, I'm actually going to go a little bit towards the right of the center of the difference. And I'm that at the bottom, my readout set is 1865. And I'm going to check to make sure that I'm recording. Okay, sweet. That was a little bit of a panic attack moment. And then I'm going to go in here and reduce this. Notice, once again, I still have 2 large humps here. that suggests to me that my Q is not low enough. So I'm going to drastically increase my Q, and also I'm going to shift my frequency upwards to try to match the curves that I am seeing. And there are a couple things that I can do here. Is I can decide if I want to leave it like something like this, but then that gives me two filters that I have to add. I have to add in a correction filter here and a correction filter here. And then we're already going to be at 5 filters. So this is at the stage where I'm thinking, am I going to have enough filters in order to do what I need to do further on towards the treble and the frequency response? And I'm thinking currently no, due to the fact just that it's a KZ IEM. So I'm going to see if I can get this to work with a smaller number of filters. And you notice that I have to go back and adjust a previous filter because these filters have affected one another. And I'm also going to adjust the Q on this one so that I feel like it's getting a little bit more accuracy on it. And I'm also going to shift the frequency up to more accurately match my curve. And now what I'm seeing here is that I'm kind of having the same issue. I have a place where I need to add and a place where I need to subtract to really get my pinna curve correct or accurate. I am going to absolutely ignore that for now, and then I'm going to focus on this area of difference, because you notice we can think of these as this as one zone. This region and this region are 2 separate zones. So I'm going to focus and imagine that this curve goes all the way here, and imagine that this curve goes all the way here, and deal with them independently and individually. So my center of difference is somewhere around 2805. I'm going to just make an educated guess at the Q and see if it is accurate. And it's accurate-ish. I can see if a narrower Q would work, and it doesn't, because you see I still have that remainder that's not being affected. So we can try, I typically stick to the following Qs. 1, 1.4, 1.7, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And someone can message me on IEF if they have questions about why that is, but I typically stick to that. But we can always play with intermediary Qs and try to get it exactly spot on, because 3 looked a little bit too much for me. It seemed like it was affecting more than it should, but at the same time, 4 seemed too sharp. I think I'm going to end up coming back to just leaving this to 3, because I noticed that I'm now going to have to go back to my 2K filter, and I'm going to have to make some changes to it, because now the region that's affected, that's lifted, is even wider. So I'm going to have to try something like a 0.8. Also, once again, an absolutely insane thing to do, but let's see how it's going to work, because KZ is likely not the best example that I should use for this tutorial, because it's not easy, but hopefully you'll be able to see what is going on at least. So I am going to switch this back to 3. I'm also going to shift it to the right a little bit and then lift it up to where it aligns. I can fine tune it later. Right now, just for this tutorial, I'm getting it close enough. And I'm going to come back and fix these later on. Don't you worry about that. I felt you worrying, and I'm just going to say calm down. Don't worry about it. 6 is going to be too sharp just to the amount of difference on this next one. But I'm going to do it anyways, because there's kind of a how good can we expect to get with something like this, and the answer is not great. So I'm going to go ahead and generate both of these values corrections, and then I'm going to come back and see what I can do to get them as close as possible to a target. In general, There are a lot of IEMs where I shoot for plus or minus 0.1 dB from my target. Plus or minus 0.1 dB from my target, from 30 hertz to typically the coupler resonance, which would be about in here. So we notice that we've kind of generated more peaks. So we have now even more dips. So in a perfect world, we could add an infinite number of filters, but that's going to cause a variety of issues, so we can't do that. So what you're going to see me do now is just some minor tweaks to rein things back in based on how other changes shifted and affected things. Notice that we're starting to get a good overlay here. Our treble is a little bit more accurate. I can come back and fix this pinner region and get it a little more closer to the target. And then I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to make some pretty stark changes. So you're going to see some things that are not going to look great. But I'm going to hopefully have enough filters to come back and fix it. One thing that I want to fix before I fix this region is I really would like to fix this dip here at 1K. The beginning of the presence region is very important. I mean, all regions are important, but this region is very important. So I'm going to find that value of delta, that value of greatest difference, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix it to some extent. 4 was too narrow, so we're going to do a nice 3, align it. We notice that we're still having this issue here where this guy is a problem. So I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to change this guy radically. I'm just not liking what I'm getting. I'm going to change this guy radically, and I'm going to add another filter. I'm just going to assume that it's somewhere around 1400. Yeah, it is somewhere around 1400, and you're going to see what I mean by that in a second. So now what I've kind of done is, instead of trying to fix this region with just one, I'm fixing it with several. And I'm not liking the results that I'm going to get. I'm just being honest. This is something that at this point I might consider just redoing my treble region. But I'm not going to give up quite yet. And this is what happens when you come in doing something that you know nothing about. That you've never worked with before. And the KZZST is a cursed IEM that I wish did not exist. Alright, we're starting to get somewhere. I don't know if that somewhere is good, but we're starting to get somewhere. So I can fix this a little bit and allow this new peaking filter to fix this region. I can also reduce my gain on this one a little bit, and I can come and see if I can do a shift in this to get a general alignment better, because I'm going to run out of filters. So there are going to be some sacrifices that I have to make to hit my standard self-assigned penance, my self-assigned number of filters that I must hit. All right, it's starting to look good. So my 2800 is now a minus that does not need to be a minus. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to reduce this again. I'm going to reduce this again. I think I'm going to shift it downwards slightly and then bring it back up. I'm going to shift this up because I'm not liking this region a whole lot. I'm going to change the Q to get rid of my difference. And I'm starting to get a much better result. Like my overall alignment to target is starting to get much more desirable. And I do not have a filter yet at this value, and I have to have one. So I'm going to look at what the value is, and I'm going to put a kibosh in that little peak here. There are some changes that I'm going to make soon that should have a positive effect on the overall treble peakiness. Boom. And we're starting to look much better. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to lift this up. And I'm going to come back here and shift it to the left and lift it down and lower it a little bit. And I'm starting to get a general pinna region that I like. I'm noticing also that there are a couple filters that I might be able to get rid of later on, and we'll just see about that and deal with that later. All right, let's look at my treble filters. Yeah, I can make this a 5. Sometimes you gotta mess stuff up to make stuff right while doing this. So you're going to see some things get worse, but I know that they're kind of already accounted for elsewhere by other filters. Like I already know I have a filter around 3300. So though I'm messing this region up, I do know that I can come back here and I have a filter that I can widen out a little bit and just try to get this treble a little bit more aligned. Some people call this upper mids. That's not what we use in audio engineering terms. So I consider this, and we'll call this treble. So if you see me talking about the pinna peak as treble, that's why. And don't get upset by it. I mean, you can get upset by whatever you want, but anyways. Why is this peak such a bad peak? So let's see what's going to happen in here. So you can decide whether or not you are going to fix coupler resonance. Sometimes you cannot see my hand. I don't know why I'm moving my hand like you can see it. Sometimes I'm going to stop my graph, my correction, my profile right here. When making it for others, because I don't know where their canal resonance is, so the coupler resonance may not apply to them. For me, most of my targets are made for my custom IEMs, and my canal resonance is a little bit deeper than the lower 7.xk of a typical canal resonance. Mine tends to be around 8,000 to 8,500. So I am going to come and I am going to fix this resonance to my target as well. And I say my target, but I should say the target that I am currently working with. Because this is most definitely not my personal target, but it's not far from it. And I'm going to make this a nice... Yes, there we go. So you saw that I just messed a whole lot of stuff up. But it's hopefully going to come back to give us just a general overall better alignment to our target. And that is the goal at this point when we have such a cursed frequency response. I would normally go for much more accurate alignment than this. My standard when I send people EQ profiles is plus or minus 0.1 dB variation from target within correction range, with a couple places of 0.2 dB. But this one is just gonna have to live with the fact that this is a KZ IEM. So this is getting generated by this. This peak is getting created by this. Starting to get something that looks quasi-acceptable. It's not going to be good. This end result. So thank you, SecMet. Mad big shout out for giving me an absolute awful IEM to do this tutorial on, and to make me look like I'm not the room EQ wizard, but we'll do the best that we can. I don't have a filter around there, so I'm going to add one and live with the fact that I'm never going to use these IEMs. So I will kind of break my cardinal rule about 11 bands just to get within margin of error. What am I doing? I believe I have a filter around there, I thought. Yes, I do. So I'm going to shift this to try to go a little bit of above and a little bit beyond my curve, because it's better, instead of having that, to have a general small variance here, in my opinion. So I'm going to do that. I wonder what happens if I just get rid of this filter. Bad things happen. Yep, that looks good. I'm gonna have to make a sacrifice somewhere, and I'm okay with making a sacrifice here. Let's look at our treble filters and see if there are any that we can adjust to get a general up and down variance that's slightly more acceptable. Not going to be great regardless, just due to the nature of what we were starting with, but it's going to be better than what it was, at least. And that's what matters. That's the whole goal of EQ. There should be a filter around here, yeah. So at this time, I would probably ship this and say that this one is done. There are a couple of things that I want to try to get my bass in line and to try to get my treble right. But I would call this done or good enough for this IEM. For most IEMs, this is not going to be acceptable. But the whole point of this was just to give you a general idea of tips and techniques on how to generate EQ profiles. So I would go back in and I would tweak this with a low shelf. I would go up here and I would probably do something just dummy stupid and eventually get this much closer. I would do something like this. In all honesty, I'm going to just really crank up how wide that value is. One thing that I did want to mention is that the lower you go, the lower the Q is going to need to be to affect a large frequency area. So like if we look at 3000 here, I only need a Q of about 3 to affect this whole region, but if I put a 3Q right here, it would barely affect anything. I need a wider one to affect more because Qs are related to octave bandwidth. So my policy of jacking shit up to make stuff better seems to have worked. And this is sometimes what you have to do with peak year IEMs. I recently had someone that I taught try to do one that was rather difficult, and this is what I ended up doing to get it to something acceptable. I'm going to continue to just jack this shit up and get something that's more accurate to my target. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to say that this is done. I would continue to work on this, but I think I've shown and discussed most of the main things I need to. I don't want this to be longer than it needs to. So a couple things that we can do is we can go in here and hit the save button and save our EQ filter settings. And we can just say ZST16 because I'm converting it to that. And then the next thing you're going to do is, in order to make this something that's importable to EQ APO or elsewhere, you have to export the overall filter settings as text. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my EQ filters, and I don't have the settings set up properly on this device to see my maximum amount of gain that I'm using with my filters. Here we go. So I am looking at, what is my preamp gun? I'm going to eyeball my preamp because I don't have the dedicated ones, but I can show someone if they need later on how exactly to get the preamp value. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Export, and then export filter settings as text. And I'm going to name it ZST16. Save it to my desktop. I'm going to go to that file, and I'm going to open it and turn it to something that I can either just copy and paste to EQ APO's config.txt or load into Piece GUI, though I don't use Piece GUI. I'm going to eyeball my preamp. My greatest gain is 7.3 and then 6 nearby, and these are additive, which is why I generally like to look at my overall filter values, but I don't have REW set up for that on this PC. So I'm going to say that we have a lot of boosts in this region, but we also have a lot of reduction in this region. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to do something like minus 8 dB, and I'm fairly certain that's going to cover it. And now I have something that I can either load into the config.txt file in EQ APO, or that I can import into Piece GUI, or that I can use to create an impulse response for a different application. But that's not something that's part of this tutorial. So if you have any questions, if you need anything at all, you can reach out to me under Kierke, Kierke, on the In-Ear Fidelity Discord server. And let me know if you have any questions, if you need any help, if you need an EQ profile made, or if you're struggling to make an EQ profile. Let me know, and I'm here to help. Literally my job. So thanks for paying attention to me rambling for this long, and I hope you have a great day.